Today, I will narrate to you the end of the Roman Empire, plain and simple. The last 50 years of Roman imperial tradition was quite the epic tragedy. Just when the Palaiologoi dynasty produced 3 tireless patriotic rulers willing to go to any lengths for their state, the situation at hand was irreversibly out of control. Manuel II Palaiologos, his son Ioannes VIII and Konstantinos XI, by the grace of God, emperors of the Romans, really tried their best. But the best of 2 generations was not sufficient to undo the damage of their many incompetent and selfish predecessors. However, their efforts made sure that the Eastern Roman Empire would fall with a bang, and not perish with a whimper like the Western Empire. You're all familiar with Constantinople's last stand in 1453, but what about the lead-up to it? Let's explore. Timur, the terrible scourge of Eurasia, accidentally saved the Roman Empire from the Ottomans and did them a huge favor by breaking up the empire of Sultan Bayezid, the arrogant foe of Romania who now languished in a Timurid cage and killed himself out of shame. His sons and many other Turkish beys now contested for Anatolian hegemony, giving the Romans time to breathe. Emperor Manuel II was in Paris when he received news of Constantinople's deliverance, and after a long trip, he was back in 1403. His nephew and co-emperor, Ioannes VII, held the capital under intense stress while he was in Europe, so the younger Vasilevs expected some kind of reward. He had one in mind: Thessaloniki. Wait, you say. Didn't Thessaloniki already fall to the Turks in Manuel's youth? Yes, but remember, Ottoman Civil War. Bayezid's sons, Suleiman, Musa, Isa, and Mehmed were too busy fighting each other, and Suleiman, who was based in Europe, sought the Romans as his allies. In the generous Treaty of Gallipoli, he returned Thessaloniki, Halkidiki, the northern Spreads Islands, and the coasts of Thessaly, the Marmara, and the Black Sea to the Romans, who were no longer vassals either. Ioannes VII signed this before Manuel returned, and this may have annoyed the older Vasilevs, who exiled his nephew for some reason. Ioannes VII was obviously upset and joined up with the Gattilusio of Lesbos to wrest Thessaloniki from Manuel, who saw sense and just gave him Thessaloniki in peace. Manuel's trusted officer, Dimitrios Laskaris Leontaris, escorted him to Thessaloniki, where he ruled, quite adeptly if not too autonomously, until his death. Andronicus V, his son, was to be both Ioannes VII and Manuel's heir, but the boy died young, and the line of Andronicus IV finally left Roman politics. Good. Let's leave Ioannes VII to serve Thessaloniki while we return to Manuel. Manuel may not have liked the treaty with Suleiman, but he ratified it. Now the empire was back on its feet, and it was the Turk who submitted to the Roman, not vice versa like years ago. Manuel could finally put his talents to use. The next decade, he expertly played the Ottoman princes against each other, while bringing his empire some recovery. Like Murad and Bayezid before, Manuel was now the kingmaker, the father that Suleiman, the European sultan, tried to please. In Asia, Mehmed took control. Musa was his underling, and Isa was killed. The Roman Empire sat smack in the middle of the Ottoman one, preventing its reunification, and Manuel intended to keep it thus. From 1403 to 1407, he continued actively pursuing his quest to gain Latin aid, though no Western power could spare itself. The Latins closer to home caused him no less headache either, as he had to help his dear brother, Despot Theodorus I of Morea, evict the Knights Hospitallers from Greece. Last episode, if you remember, even the highly capable Theodorus buckled under intense Turkish pressure in the Peloponnese, selling Corinth and Mistra to the Knights of Rhodes to defend. But the local Romans hated their new occupiers. Their despot had to get rid of them. With Manuel's diplomatic expertise, the Knights signed a treaty in 1404 and left the Morea. Soon, his fourth son, Konstantinos XI, was born. In the West, Manuel chose a better ambassador, Manuel Chrysoloras, the most respected Roman scholar for the Catholics. In 1407, Chrysoloras left home to represent his Vasilevs in Europe. This, and Theodorus passing the same year, left Manuel in deep grief and solitude. The Vasilevs personally visited the Morea in 1408 to pay respects to his dead brother and install his son, Despot Theodorus II, in Morea. In Mistra, Manuel got the idea to write his famous funeral oration for his brother and to repair the Hexamelion, ancient fortifications in Corinth protecting the Peloponnese from northern invasions. but the project was postponed for later. Manuel first hurried north to Thessaloniki, where Ioannes VII died with no heir. So he made his young son, Andronicus, its despot, with Leontaris as regent. In 1409, Manuel returned home just in time to deal with Ottoman interregnum drama. Bayezid's most fierce son, Musa, just came to Europe to fight Suleiman, who quickly formally allied with Manuel in Constantinople the next year, but he proved too weak and was killed by 1411. Vengeful Sultan Musa now punished the Romans by besieging Constantinople. The now more experienced Manuel handled Musa's siege better than Bayezid's. It seems now the Romans had a small navy again, led by Admiral Manuel, a bastard brother of Emperor Manuel, who crushed the Turks at sea. The Vasilevs got diplomatic and allied with Mehmed in 1412. Though the Anatolian Sultan was at first defeated, Manuel kept encouraging him until he prevailed over Musa and reunited the Ottoman Empire in 1413. He would never forget Manuel's support. Mehmed returned to Manuel all the lands lost to Musa, and both gentlemen settled for peace. The Roman and Ottoman empires were chill neighbors for an only time in history, and Manuel could focus on his literary activities. He was an emperor who left us with a ton of written works. Most were authored in this age, and many were for educating his eldest son, Ioannes VIII, the ruler in training left to govern the capital when Manuel picked up his Maximilian project in 1414. He first stopped by Thassos to personally lead a victory against the Getalusio invader of the island. Then he helped Andronicus in Thessaloniki before going to the Morea. In the west, Chrysoras was at the Council of Constance before he died, working on church union. In 1415, Manuel's grand accomplishment of restoring the hexamelion was done in just 25 days, at the cost of heavily taxing the Moreans, who revolted. The elderly Manuel again took the field and defeated the rebels. He used a lot of time pacifying the fiery Archontes in Morea before going home. While Manuel labored on the hexamelion, Iorius Gemistos Platon, a philosopher he sent to the Morea, wrote to him. Platon thanked the Vasilevs for his efforts and shared his own 2 cents on how to make the Morea even better. Model it on Plato's ideal republic. He also proposed later, to the horror of Roman Orthodox contemporaries, a new religion, a synthesis of Platonism, Greek paganism, and Zoroastrianism. Now before you call Platon a raving pagan larper who just got these ideas because the ruins of ancient Sparta were in his backyard, let me remind you that he was the most respected Byzantine intellectual in the empire and in Italy during his life. He was a top-rate teacher of Plato in Constantinople before his less orthodox ideas landed him in Mistra, where his renown continued to grow. Manuel and his sons adored him, even if they didn't take his advices. Classics lovers, Romans and Italians alike, flocked to meet him. His students certainly included the illustrious Bessarion of Trebizond and Isidoros of Kiev, if not Iorius Scholarius and Marcus of Ionikos too. You'll hear their names a lot. Platon's most prominent pupils only followed their master in his infectious love of ancient Greek philosophy and culture, not religion as well. Like Byzantine Hellenists of old, their study of their Greek past only complemented their staunch Roman and Christian identities, not opposed them like Platon. Platon was the exception and not the norm. But he was the culmination of what many Palaiologian, Komnenian, and late Macedonian scholars have explored before him. Fascination for the Eastern Roman Hellenic heritage only grew as their empire declined, and with a personality like Platon, the despotate of the Morea became the most fertile breeding ground for Byzantine Hellenism. This spirit, coupled with the indomitable nature of the Moreans, as seen with their repeated troublemaking for the Palaiologoi, are partially reasons why the 1821 Greek Revolution began here. Might as well tease the rise of modern Greece, since we're talking about the fall of New Rome now. But I digress. In 1416, Manuel once more took advantage of Ottoman civil strife. Mehmed was having troubles with the pretender sultan, and Junayd, the last bey of Aydin. The Romans and Venetians backed them, leading to the destruction of Mehmed's fleet by the Venetians, again hindering the Turks from developing their naval warfare. As you'll see at the 1453 Siege of Constantinople, Christian superiority at sea was a large reason the city held out for so long. Mehmed defeated his rivals, but Manuel harbored them in his empire in exchange for the Sultan paying their pensions. This was smart. A few competitors in Roman territory could act as bargaining chips with the Turks, and being the master diplomat, Manuel did all this while causing no extreme hard feelings between him and Mehmed. Manuel's sons continued this policy, with less success. Speaking of Manuel's sons, it's time to introduce them properly, as Manuel was stepping out of government. When he went back to Constantinople, he let his eldest son, Ioannes VIII, try his hand governing the Morea. Ioannes was always supposed to succeed him, and Manuel took great care of his education. The young Vasilevs took after his father's patriotism, but sadly not his wisdom, believing in genuine union with the Latins and no compromise with the Turks. His youthful rashness would unravel the precarious peace Manuel achieved with his own subjects and the Ottomans. Ioannes briefly ruled in the Morea as training with his brother, Despot Theodoros II. Theodoros was the second son. He inherited his father's love of learning. An enthusiastic scholar, the despot fostered a lively intellectual scene in the Morea with Plethon as its star. The bros teamed up for an expansionist Peloponnesian policy. Almost the whole peninsula would return to Roman control. From 1417 onwards, Venice complained often about the despot's aggression to Manuel, even long after Ioannes left the Morea in 1418. Meanwhile, a new pope showed support for the Morea by granting indulgence to all Latins who helped with the hexamelion, and he got Catholic brides for Ioannes and Theodoros. Manuel's third son, Andronicus, despot of Thessaloniki, was a nice lad, but his ill health prevented him from being as able as his brothers. The most capable was, of course, the fourth son, Konstantinos XI, who was still young, but already got himself a devoted historian to document his reign. A teenage official that Manuel just recruited, Georgios Francis. Francis grew very close with Konstantinos and faithfully served his master, all while writing a valuable chronicle. The two youngest sons, Dimitrios and Thomas, would be the last despots of the Morea and the last rulers of the Palaiologian Empire, but they were selfish and incompetent. Thomas slightly less so. Now the Latin brides, Sophia of Montferrat and Cleova Malatesta, arrived in 1420. Ioannes married Sophia in 1421, and he was formally crowned. Ironically, Ioannes would detest his wife, who was not so pretty. Yet Theodoros hit the jackpot, marrying the gorgeous and intelligent Cleova, who thoroughly Romanized and formed a power couple with him. Now that Ioannes was in charge, he and his faction wanted to take the fight to the Ottomans. Mehmed was coming to Thrace. Ioannes' friends wanted to kill him, but Manuel refused, although the gentleman sultan died shortly anyway, succeeded by his son, Murad II, who would have liked to just keep being pals with Manuel, but Ioannes decided to let the pretender Mustafa, who lived in the empire, go stir up a civil war among the Turks. At this point, Manuel was too old and tired, so he just let his son fully take over. Big mistake. Mustafa was crushed the next year, and Murad, learning of the Roman betrayal, ended their friendship. With full Ottoman might, he came for Constantinople. The 1422 Siege of Constantinople saw the Romans more willing to defend their capital than 20 years ago. Men, women, elders, everyone contributed. Ioannes personally led assaults against the Ottomans, who got their first small cannons and bombarded the walls while the Roman defenders had a few handguns. The age of gunpowder empires was coming, and though the Romans fought off this siege, whether due to Ioannes' leadership, intervention from the Theotokos, or just clever old Manuel inciting Murad's baby brother who took Mustafa's partisans to rebellion, Romania wouldn't be so lucky next time. Thessaloniki was also besieged. Everything Manuel worked on the past 2 decades was gone, and tellingly, he had a stroke just after the siege, when some papal legates came to discuss church union, which Ioannes was wholeheartedly for. In fact, Ioannes now traveled to the west in 1423 to ask for help like his father, while his brother, Andronicus, was collapsing from Turkish pressure on Thessaloniki. No longer able to defend it, the sickly despot offered Venice the second city of the empire if they could respect the rights and faith of the Romans there. Venice accepted, bringing some relief to the Thessalonians at first, but they wouldn't fare much better against the Ottomans. This is the definitive end of Roman Thessaloniki. 30 years later, it would be Roman Constantinople's turn. Ioannes' other brother, Theodoros, also had to deal with Turkish onslaught, as Turhan Bey breached the hexamelion and devastated the Morea. things looked dire. In 1424, Ioannes returned with no help gained. Again, it was Manuel who cleaned up the mess by signing a treaty with Murad, ceding all territories from Suleiman, and the emperor had to pay the sultan for the right to rule. Venice tried to get along with Murad, but failed, and Thessaloniki was still threatened. The only part eligible for a Roman revival was the Morea. As soon as the Turks left, Theodoros turned to face the Latins there. Achaea was dwindling. The Duke of Athens was a Turkish vassal, but Carlo Tocco, Lord of Kefalonia and Epirus, had designs in the Peloponnese. In time, the Palaiologos brothers would drive them all from their despotate. Sadly, Manuel died in 1425. His death was mourned by all his subjects. At age 75, Manuel had seen it all, the deterioration from the days after his father and grandfather's civil war until his own times. It was a painful process to personally live through the slow death of his own empire, while dealing with insufferable nuisances like his idiot family and neurotic nemesis Bayezid. But he gained so much experience that he became a living bundle of political wisdom. He matured so much through his trials and errors, and the last brief window of tranquility in Roman history was all his work. He learned to masterfully utilize Roman soft power and diplomacy to get what's best for the empire, from dangling the possibility of union with the Latins to maintaining amity with the Ottomans. There is some tragedy in his story, like that of Heraclius, just having put the empire on the path to recovery and losing all his gains to one mistake. Perhaps Manuel could have passed on more of his prudence to Ioannes, but his impact on the empire and beyond was by no means small. His tour of Europe was so sensational, the Latins began appreciating and sympathizing with the empire which once ruled their lands, instead of just dismissing the Eastern Romans as schismatic Greeks. Manuel and his ambassador, Chrysoloras, generally did so much to kickstart the Renaissance thanks to their erudition. In the Roman Empire itself, the subjects who followed Manuel on this tumultuous journey grew with him. They passively resisted his attempts to save Thessaloniki and Constantinople from Ottoman sieges in the 14th century, preferring safe vassaldom to taking a risky stand for their honor. Now in the 15th century, they proved more than eager to fight for the empire in the 1422 siege, and soon in the 1453 one too. Maybe, seeing the Vasilevs giving his all to the welfare of the state changed the Roman mentality, which got so used to the abuses of the bickering and privileged Palaiologoi for too long. We could thank Timur for his accidental salvation of the empire, but we should also acknowledge Manuel's efforts in making the best of them. He, more than anyone else, was why the Roman Empire survived 5 decades more in Constantinople and 6 in the Morea. Legendary. Sorry for the Manuel eulogy. Back to history. The next few years, Ioannes VIII, now sole emperor, spent his attention on continuing his aggressive policies in the Morea. In 1426, he went there with his favorite brother Konstantinos to help Theodoros fight Carlo Tocco. They arrived in 1427 and conquered Clarenza from him, then the last ever Roman naval victory at the Battle of Echinadis, led by Leontares, that ended all Tocco's Peloponnesian ambitions. The next year, Konstantinos married Tocco's daughter and gained his lands as dowry. Then he assaulted Patras with his brothers. But he wasn't content with just that. In 1429, he conquered Patras, getting him on the watch list of both the Latins and Turks. His historians Francis pacified the Turks, but the Latins fought on for another year. Meanwhile, Thomas was subjugating the decaying principality of Achaea. Like his brother, he gained lands by marrying the last prince's daughter. Things looked good in southern Greece, and when Thomas and Konstantinos switched capitals in 1430, so that Konstantinos moved north and got Corinth, he could now pursue his projects in central Greece. But in the north, in Thessaloniki, the Venetians kind of forgot their promise to respect Roman rights, and with an unwilling garrison, Murad's assault on 29 March saw the metropolis fall definitively to the Turks. It was a bloodbath. All Romans mourned. Then Murad took Ioannina from Carlo Tocco, despot of Epirus. These devastating losses pushed Ioannes to seek union with the Pope, who died in 1431 and complicated the negotiations. The Romans were supposed to attend a council in Basel, Switzerland, but a successor, Eugenius IV, wanted it to occur in Italy. It was a pissing contest between Basil and the papacy over who could make the Eastern Romans Catholic, and both sides tempted Ioannis, who would eventually accept the Pope's offer. His efforts for church union took up most of his reign. He ignored his father's advice to never commit to union, as the Roman people never accepted, and their division is more harmful than any foreign threat, seen in the reign of the first Palaiologoi emperor. But Ioannis really believed in Christian unity, and spent the 1430s assembling the most impressive delegation of Roman sages for Italy. Meanwhile, the Turks invaded the Morea again, with no lasting damage. Ioannis' brothers, the despots, did good for the state closer to home. When the Prince of Achaia died in 1432, Thomas swooped in to inherit his remaining lands, thus ending the principality. Now, except for several Venetian port cities, all of the Morea was Roman again. The despotate prospered, but in 1433, its despina, Cleopha, died. Scholars of Mistra mourned for their patroness, but none was more affected than her husband, Theodoros, whose mental state and bond with his brothers deteriorated, especially with Konstantinos, who was getting into the succession crisis of the Acciaioli Dukes of Athens from 1434 to 1435. He failed to get Athens, and the old Athenian noble family, the Halkokontili, who would produce the historian Laonikos, emigrated to Mistra for supporting the wrong side. Then Konstantinos was called to Constantinople by Ioannis, who was preparing to leave for Italy and needed a trusted brother to guard the capital for him. But Theodoros was hurt when he found out in 1436. He thought he should be the heir of this childless Ioannis, since he was older, and when Konstantinos returned to settle things in the Morea, the brothers skirmished. They fell to the chronic Palaiologian illness of incessant infighting, but thankfully, this was resolved by Ioannis. Theodoros would rule Konstantinos' part of the Morea, while the latter left as regent of Constantinople in 1437. Konstantinos had his mother, the respected Dowager Empress Helena, his loyal friend, Sphrantzes, and his Macedon, Lucas Notaras, to guide his governance. Constantinople was in capable hands, and so was the faith of the Romans. Ioannis left for Italy with a great train of thinkers to debate with the papacy on the differences between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. He took care to include representatives from all parts of the Roman Orthodox sphere: Alexandria, Jerusalem, Wallachia, Georgia, and Russia, whose new metropolitan was Isidoros of Kiev, the Roman student of Plato, who also followed along to represent the philosophers of the Morea, despite not even being Christian. Georgios Galerius came on behalf of the philosophers of Constantinople, and the emperor, whose new empress, Maria Megarikomnini, was a Trapezuntine princess, didn't forget to get a delegation from his wife's native country, led by Georgios Amiroutsis. Bessarion of Trebizond and Marcos of Yenikos, recently ordained bishops, further complemented this learned retinue. The only person out of place here was Ioannis' brother, Demetrius, a staunch anti-unionist who wanted to claim the throne with Turkish help. No way Ioannis could leave him unsupervised. In Ferrara, the Pope hosted all 700 of Ioannis' men in 1438, but he was broke, so in 1439 he moved the council to Florence, city of the wealthy Medici. The Vasilevs' visit excited the Italian scholars and painters, but the council debates weren't fruitful. Still, union was celebrated on 6 July in Il Duomo. This would be an appropriate term for the next chapter in Roman history. If Ioannis expected to be welcomed as a hero for securing Catholic aid, he was to be disappointed. His beloved Maria Komneni, the last ever empress of the Romans, was dead, and people weren't sympathetic in the least. Violent insults were heaped upon Ioannis and those who signed the union daily. Bessarion was so sick of their bullying that he left permanently to become a cardinal in Old Rome. When Isidoros returned to Kiev in 1441 to bring news of the union, the Russians arrested him, and he escaped to Italy. Marcos of Yenikos didn't sign for the union, and now that he was home, he spoke his mind freely, becoming a champion of the Orthodox. Another champion was Demetrius, who used this as an excuse to plot with the Turks. Ioannis was so lost that he recalled Konstantinos, who left for the Morea once his brother returned. On the way, he married a second time on Lesbos to Katerina Gatalousi, and once he saw that the Morea did well without him, he thought about letting Demetrius switch appanages with him. He could take over his old post in Salimbria, closer to Ioannes, and Demetrius could be far away. But in 1442, the Turks backed Demetrius in his attempt to take Constantinople. Constantinos saved the day, and Demetrius was imprisoned, and Salimbria was given to Konstantinos in 1443. But he soon left, as Theodoros proposed to switch the Morea for Salimbria with him. And being sick of life around the capital, Konstantinos agreed, becoming despot of the Morea. And he was the last great despot. First, he fixed the ruined Hexamelion, then in 1444, he began reconquering the Duchy of Athens, an Ottoman vassal. He chose a good time. The crusade the Pope promised Ioannes was ready under the famous Hungarian János Hunyadi. Konstantinos could menace the Ottoman rear by taking the duchy. He conquered Thebes and Athens, and vassalized the Duke, who cried to his Turkish master. But Murad was busy destroying the Latins at Varna. Like the one in Nicopolis, this crusade saw most crusaders slaughtered. Only Hunyadi escaped. However, Murad took a break before he decided to handle Konstantinos, who used 1445 to expand further north, through Phokis and taking everything up to the Pindos range, including Ottoman cities. And that was the final straw for Murad, who marched against the despot in 1446 with a massive army. All of Konstantinos' latest conquests were lost, and he retreated into the Morea proper. He tried to take a stand with Thomas at his rebuilt Hexamelion, but Turkish cannons blasted through it, despite Konstantinos' and Thomas' efforts. Foreshadowing for Konstantinos' future combat with cannons during the Siege of Constantinople? In any case, the despotate was devastated by Murad and Turahan Bey. The Ottomans left with 60,000 slaves and the Morea as a vassal. Konstantinos spent 1447 repairing the damage, having learned not to travel with the Turks the hard way. Like Manuel and Ioannes, who now ruled an ever more hopeless empire, and no European could really help the Romans now. And in Constantinople there was almost a succession crisis. Theodoros died, followed by Emperor Ioannes, who died with no official heir. Everyone knew he favored Konstantinos, but the despot was far away in the Morea, while Demetrius, recently released, was close by. Thanks to Empress Dowager Helena, Francis, and Notaras, however, Konstantinos' succession was secured, and the last Roman emperor was crowned in the Morea in 1449, an unprecedented ceremony. This would have pleased Ioannes. He was an emperor who gave everything he got but simply couldn't amount to the challenges. Union made him hated, despite his sincerity. The empire he left his capable brother was unsalvageable. Emperor Konstantinos XI stepped into the divided capital, where the Romans still rejected everything Union-related, including the Patriarch of Constantinople. So it was good that he was crowned in Mistra. He then took care of his despotate, sending Demetrius to co-rule it with Thomas, and these two would see the Morea get no chill due to their constant bickering. Only with intervention from the emperor or the sultan could they stop their quarrels. Konstantinos ruled over a polarized people in an ancient city that had long since lost its grandeur, but for a time, it seemed as if this new Roman emperor would bring hope. But as the 1450s dawned, everything became more hopeless. His mother, the wise and respected Helena, died in 1450, depriving the empire of an experienced counselor. Francis left for the east to earn his widowed emperor a bride from Trebizond or Georgia, with no result, dooming the last Roman emperor to have no project. In 1451, the Patriarch had it with the toxicity in New Rome, and he left for Old Rome forever. He was to be the last Patriarch of Constantinople before the fall. Worst of all was Murad's death that year, leaving his son, 19-year-old Mehmed II, the Sultan. If Mehmed was just a normal kid, then this would have been good news, as the Emperor Ioannes IV of Trebizond told Francis, who knew the truth and didn't celebrate. Mehmed wasn't a normal kid. He didn't have a happy childhood, and his obsession with conquering Constantinople had already landed him in trouble with his own Ottoman officials. The only one with any influence over this headstrong sultan was his stepmother, Mara Brankovic, part of the late Murad's harem, who could leave now with her husband's death. Sprantzis and Ioannes IV felt that she could be a suitable empress for Konstantinos, but she refused. Meanwhile, Konstantinos grossly underestimated Mehmed, who seemed so compliant. He asked the Turks to increase their pension of an Ottoman pretender to the throne, Orhan, who resided in the empire. Mehmed smiled. Now, he had an excuse to finally conquer his desired city. In 1452, he began preparing the final siege. He constructed the fort Rumeli Hisar on the Bosphorus, like his great-grandfather Bayezid's Anadolu Hisar, to blockade the city. Konstantinos realized he messed up, and immediately asked for aid from the West. He had pursued union to a degree, but the Westerners were too busy with their own stuff to help. The Murad could offer nothing either. Turahan Bey again invaded. The Murayan story will continue the next time. In Constantinople, Isidoros of Kiev brought a few Latin works from the Pope, but he came more to preach union, and he was intensely opposed by Scholarios anti-unionists. The price of papal aid was full submission. Konstantinos had to celebrate unionist mass in the Hagia Sophia with Isidoros. Now the anti-unionists wouldn't even step into the great church. While Mehmed was uniting the Ottoman army with purpose, he was able to pay the Hungarian gunmaker, Orban, to build the biggest, baddest cannon ever to bombard the impregnable Theodosian walls. The Romans mounted to defend their city with Venetian ships and the Genoese noble Giustiniani, a brave volunteer, since Genoa decided to stay out of it. A lot of the last defenders of the city were volunteers, and in total, the garrison numbered 7,000. In early 1453, Turks in Rumelia took the last of Roman Thrace. The city was isolated. On April 2nd, the siege began with heavy bombardments. This story is familiar to all of you. Mehmed fired relentlessly at Constantinople day and night, causing the mighty Theodosian walls to finally begin to crumble. Giustiniani and the Romans defended the walls as best as they could, while few reinforcements came from the west. The Turkish navy was outmaneuvered by 4 Christian ships supplying the city and greatly humiliated, to the joy of the defenders and the wrath of Mehmed, who decided to just get rid of his naval inferiority by rolling ships overland into the Golden Horn, behind Galata, and the Genoese there pretended to see nothing. The Romans found in horror the Turkish fleet in their harbor and planned to burn the ships, but this attempt failed due to bickering between the Venetian and Genoese allies. This was the turning point from which things went full downhill. Giustiniani still defended the city walls valiantly, and the Scottish mercenary John Grant countered Turkish miners who wanted to destroy the foundations of the walls, but not much could be done anymore. However, Konstantinos refused to surrender when Mehmed offered it, stubbornly resisting until the very end, which was drawing near. No one would help them now. Venice and the Pope promised more large ships, but they weren't coming. The Romans could only place their hope in the aid of their protectress, the Virgin, but even she seemed to desert them, and the red glow above the dome of the Hagia Sophia was seen as her leaving her city in these strange lights. More despair reigned, but on the night of the 28th May, Romans and allies alike united in the Hagia Sophia for one last, shared Mass. They forgot the controversy of union, and that the Italians were heretical according to them. Orthodox or Catholic, it stopped mattering. They just wanted one last liturgy in Justinian's great monument before the city was stormed, as Mehmed was preparing for the final grand offensive just outside, also stoking up the religious fervor of his men. The emperor addressed the defenders one last time in a memorable speech before taking a stand for his empire. The massive Turkish army threw all they got at the weakened walls, and while the Christians had beaten off 2 waves, the 3rd wave of elite janissaries was simply too much to handle. The Turks stormed in, and Vasilev Konstantinos XI Dragasis Palaiologos, last emperor of the Romans, fell fighting for Constantinople with his men. His body was never found, leaving some to ponder if he had been carried off by angels at the last moment to fight another day. A night of chaos passed, and on 29th May 1453, Constantinople was in the hands of Mehmed II. Constantine would serve him well as the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. And thus ended the Roman Empire. I'll leave the narrative here and clean up the pieces next time. How the Sultan treated his prized conquest, how he dealt with the Morea and other pockets of resistance in the Roman world, and what it all means. But this isn't the end of the Roman story. Even if the next video will be the last in the Eastern Rome Summarized series, I have long alluded that I will go back to 1280 and recount Trapezuntine history in Trebizond Summarized. That small but rich Pontic Empire deserves so much more credit than it usually gets for surviving in a literal sea of Turkish emirates for so long. And even then, after the fall of Trebizond and its Crimean offshoot, the Principality of Theodora in 1475, we still have more to cover. The Roman state was dead, but the Roman people lived, in diaspora or under their Turkish overlords. How did they adjust to new realities? Did they continue seeing themselves as Romans? If you aren't the least bit interested in all this, I suppose you want to stick around this channel. And I don't want to limit myself with only the fate of the Greek Romans in the Balkans and Anatolia. Maybe in time I could consider covering the survival of the Roman identity in other long-lost imperial provinces. Italy, Gaul, and the Levant, just to name a few. Since the series is almost finished, I want to end Eastern Rome Summarized with something special. A Q&A regarding all your Eastern Roman history-related questions. Feel free to send in questions from about the late 3rd century all the way to the mid-15th century through YouTube comments, my email, or my Instagram. Just make sure you specify that you want your question answered in the Q&A, and I'll do my best. Thanks for pursuing this series for 3 years, you wonderful Romans, and I'll see you all next time. Now, to thank my patrons,